The week between the North American races was a bit of a slow one in terms of news, but the second round and quarter-finals of the World Cup were played. The hosts eased past Bulgaria into the quarter-finals, equalling their performance at the last Mexico World Cup in 1970. A 7-goal cracker saw Belgium overcome the Soviet Union in extra time. Brazil demolished Poland 4-0. Argentina won a tight game against their neighbours and rivals Uruguay. Defending champions Italy went out to European champions France. West Germany scraped past a determined and organised Morocco. England regained some more confidence with a 3-0 win over Paraguay. And Denmark's fine debut came to a screeching halt with a 5-1 thrashing by Spain. The quarter-finals took place on the weekend of the Detroit race, and 3 of the 4 went to penalties, as France beat Brazil, Belgium beat Spain, and West Germany beat Mexico. The only quarter-final to be settled in open play was that between England and Argentina, a game that was heavily promoted as a grudge match just 4 years after the Falklands conflict. The talismanic Argentine midfielder Diego Maradona scored twice in 5 minutes shortly after half-time. His second goal is still widely considered one of the best ever scored, dancing through the entire English defence to cement his reputation as one of the all-time greats. But the first remains controversial. He jumped with English keeper Shilton and punched the ball into the net. Shilton and the English defence protested, but the goal was given. Maradona would infamously later say that the goal was scored a little with the head of Maradona and a little with the hand of God. In any case, the semi-finals would see France meet West Germany in a replay of the legendary 1982 semi-final, while Argentina would face Belgium. While all this drama was going on in Mexico, north of the border the Formula One teams were setting up in Detroit, the 4th circuit on the trot that they would approach blind with no testing, making practice and qualifying vital. Patrick Tambay's feet were still giving him pain from his crash in Montreal, and the Haas Lola team took the opportunity to sign up an American driver for the weekend. The problem being that the ongoing tiff between FISA and CART meant that neither Mario Andretti nor his son Michael could get an F1 super license in time, so Eddie Cheever flew in from his home in Italy at short notice to take to the track. Christian Danner, meanwhile, had completed his move to Arrows, with Azala signing up Canadian Alan Berg, who was racing at the time in Mexico's Chrysler-sponsored Formula K series. Like his Jaguar teammate Derek Warwick, Eddie Cheever had had a promising career somewhat stalled by association with underperforming factory teams, in his case Ligier, then Renault, then Alfa Romeo. And like Warwick, he had found himself out of an F1 drive when 1986 rolled round. He was driving touring cars for Jaguar in the meantime when he was offered a one-off drive for Haas Lola to replace the injured Patrick Tambay, an American driver in an all-American team, a great draw at the US Grand Prix. Flying in to join the team on Thursday night, he hadn't even sat in the car before Friday practice. Vancouver-born Berg began karting in 1978 at the age of 17 and moved into Formula Atlantic 3 years later. By 1983 he'd moved to the UK to compete in British Formula 3, but his timing was unfortunate as he was up against the dominance of Ayrton Senna and Martin Brundle. He won 1 race and came 5th overall, then the following year ran Johnny Dumfries close for the title. He returned to Canada to raise more funds, bouncing around various formulae to keep his name current and his eye in, and managed to secure a drive with Azella as a replacement for Christian Danner while competing in Mexican Formula K. As everyone was setting up, the Benetton team had somehow found the time to hand-paint their tyre walls to go with the United Colours theme of their livery, and these had the desired effect of getting a lot of photos taken of the car, but for whatever reason they weren't used in the race, or indeed ever again, but they looked a treat. The other thing that got the spectators talking on Friday was the apparent sight of Nigel Mansell lapping in a Ferrari. In fact, it was Stefan Johansson who'd forgotten his helmet back at the paddock, which is inaccessible once the track is live, so he'd borrowed a spare lid from Nigel. The practice and qualifying days took place in blazing sunshine, and for much of it Mansell was fastest. Senna went out about halfway through Saturday's session and casually knocked half a second off Nigel's best time. Of course, Mansell wasn't having that and went back out, but halfway around his gung-ho lap, Prost had a big accident at the chicane and the session was red flagged. When it restarted, Mansell had used all his allotted tyres, and so that was that. So Ayrton Senna had his 4th pole in 7 races, with Mansell alongside. then Piquet and Arnoux, with Johansson and Lafitte on row 3 after another excellent qualifying for Ligier. Prost was 7th after his big smash, with Patrese splitting the McLarens, and Eddie Cheever a very good 10th in the Haas considering the circumstances. Alboreto in the Ferrari could only manage 11th. The Benettons, jolly tyres notwithstanding, looked out of sorts in 12th and 17th. Danner put his arrows 19th at the first time of asking, and once again Hugh Brockengatter brought up the rear, outqualified by new boy Berg to the tune of 0.002 seconds. The Dutchman wouldn't make the start anyway, his electrics failing on the parade lap, so it was 25 cars who took the start, with Mansell and Senna blasting down to the first corner side by side, hotly pursued by Arnoux, who'd got ahead of Piquet. Everyone got through the first corner okay, and Mansell was stuck firmly to the back of Senna's Lotus, not wanting to let him get away. Arnoux then led Piquet, Johansson, Prost, Lafitte, Patrese and Cheever, with Alboreto having moved up to 10th ahead of Rosberg, and he made that 9th past Cheever partway around lap 1. If Mansell wasn't giving Senna a break, Arnoux wasn't giving Mansell one either, forcing Nigel to keep half an eye on his mirrors as the three of them drew away from Piquet, who had Johansson likewise climbing all over the back of him. As lap 3 began, Senna missed a gear and Mansell surged past into the lead, leaving Arnoux attacking the Lotus instead as the Williams began to pull away. Behind Arnoux, Piquet was still fighting off Johansson, while Lafitte got back ahead of Prost, who in turn had Alboreto now looming in his mirrors. Mansell quickly pulled out a lead of about 5 seconds or so, while Senna and Arnoux were caught by Piquet and co, making one long 6-car train in pursuit of the leader. And then suddenly they were right with him, as Mansell's brakes were playing up. On lap 6, Senna was passed at the Ford complex, and Arnoux followed through down the start-finish straight. Nigel's brakes then seemed to sort themselves out, and he was able to keep in touch with Arnoux, while Senna pulled away in the lead. Piquet was now trying to hold off Lafitte, but without success, though the cameras missed the overtake, and before long Mansell found himself as the roast beef dans un sandwich Ligier. Behind them, Alboreto had caught up to Johansson, and the Ferraris were running in formation in 7th and 8th, just behind Prost. Unnoticed by the cameras, Lafitte also got past Mansell, so now the Ligiers were running 2nd and 3rd, as the leader Senna started to lap the backmarkers, De Cesaris and Berg, with the Ligiers following in formation, and both rapidly pulling away from Mansell. Senna came in for an early tyre stop after 14 laps and rejoined 8th, which put the Ligiers into 1st and 2nd. It had been a good few years since that had been the case, if indeed it ever had. Mansell set fastest lap, his brake issues apparently now sorted, while Alboreto had got ahead of Johansson and was up into the points thanks to Senna's stop. Arnoux and Lafitte were both former winners with a point to prove, and with Guy Ligier and co presumably watching on anxiously, they were having a spirited fight for the lead. Eventually, on lap 17, Lafitte bullied his way through and took the place. Mansell was catching up again now, with Prost also closing in, as he was now past Piquet. At about a third distance then, the Ligiers led Mansell, Prost and Piquet, with Senna now having made his way back past the Ferraris into 6th. Mansell was by now right behind Arnoux, as Lafitte began to pull away in the lead. Soon enough, Nigel had Prost and Piquet right on his tail too, and after 25 laps, there was still less than 10 seconds covering the top 6, as Senna put up the fastest lap as he charged back from his pit stop. Before long, the Lotus was also stuck to the back of the train. Piquet nipped inside Prost at turn 11, and a couple of corners later Senna was passed coming into the Ford complex after the tunnel. Arnoux came in for his tyre stop at the end of that lap, and Mansell closed the gap to Lafitte a little, but still had Piquet and Senna right behind, and Prost watching and waiting to take advantage of any silly mistakes. A couple of laps after Arnoux stopped, Piquet pulled ahead of Mansell, and a few corners later Senna was passed too, coming out of the tunnel. Mansell's brake issues had flared up again, and Prost got through too, only to immediately pit. Meanwhile, Piquet had caught right up to Lafitte and was through shortly afterwards, with Senna following through a few corners later. As they picked their way through the traffic, leaving Lafitte behind, Mansell came in for his own stop on lap 34, just after half distance. It was a long one, with sticking right front tyre, and he was suffering badly from the heat and was doused with water by his team. He rejoined 7th and wasted no time getting back past Patrese to move into the points. The heat didn't seem to be bothering Piquet and Senna at the front though, as the pair traded fastest laps on laps 34 and 35. Prost had got ahead of the Ligiers too, who were back in formation with Arnoux ahead of Lafitte after their stops in 4th and 5th. On lap 38, Piquet came in for his stop, but another problem on the right front saw the number 6 Williams stationary for nearly 18 seconds. Senna was in next time around and the Lotus team had no such problems, giving Senna the lead and a big advantage, while Piquet had hung on to second at least. With Prost fighting over third with his old sparring partner Arnoux, Piquet got his foot down and gave chase to Senna, setting another fastest lap on lap 41. And then he was out. In an incident missed by the cameras, he'd wiped his nose off on the wall of the last corner before the chicane, in a really awkward spot for the marshals with their backs to the Detroit River. With a mobile crane slowly making its way to the spot, they tried to drag it out of the way to no avail. For 5 laps, the marshals struggled with the car, with yellow flags waving and cars zipping past just feet away, while Arnoux, off camera, had got ahead of Prost into second, but was some distance behind the leading Lotus of Senna. Eventually, the marshals decided they'd pushed Piquet's stricken car far enough out of danger that they stopped waving the yellow flags while they waited for the crane to pluck the car off the track, only for Arnoux to come barrelling round the corner, believing the Williams had gone, sideswipe it, bounce across the track into the path of Boutsen, who he'd just lapped, and take the arrows out into the bargain, all of which was entirely missed by the cameras. So Senna now had a big lead of about 30 seconds over Prost, with 16 laps to go, and unless something happened to the Lotus, it looked like he was nailed on for the win as he lapped teammate Dumfries and bore down on 5th-placed Alboreto. While the cameras watched Senna circulate and lap a still struggling Mansell, Lafitte was bearing down on Prost, and soon the Ligier was tucked up behind the McLaren. Prost was having engine trouble, his tag kept cutting out under braking, and wasn't too much trouble for Lafitte to sail past his upstart countryman and stay there. In the closing stages, Senna eased off sufficiently for Mansell to unlap himself, only to have a spin and drop back behind both Senna and Alboreto, as Danner dropped out with half his front wing missing, though the official reason cited was electrical problems. Alboreto also unlapped himself from Senna a couple of laps after Mansell's spin, and that was where they all finished 3 laps later. Ayrton Senna took his 4th career win and 2nd of the season, stopping to borrow a Brazilian flag for the slowing down lap, with Jacques Lafitte a happy 2nd, Prost hanging on for 3rd, with Alboreto, Mansell and Patrese the rest of the point scorers, and Dumfries, Palmer, Streff and Warwick the remaining runners. Senna thus took the lead of the Drivers' Championship, while Nelson Piquet's 3rd retirement of the year left him rapidly losing touch with the leaders, and he would have to hope to get back into the swing of things when the teams returned to Europe. As they all packed up to head to a hastily remodelled Paul Ricard for the French Grand Prix, the Ligier team at least could be happy with this weekend's work, even if they were left pondering what might have been if Arnoux hadn't been the victim of a marshalling error. Certainly, for the first time in a while, they were looking forward to their home race.